hearing water running. Okay. So, yes, welcome. So when we did ice last week, you guys, one of the questions that I put to you was whether you believe that people are inherently or basically good or bad. Some of you said, I think the majority of you said that your belief is that people are inherently good. And then there were one or two of you that said people are inherently in their core corrupt. I hope the internet is fine. It's a bit of a hanging, there's a bit of latency. Tell me, how did it go with your assignment once? Yes. Next week for assignment 1 results, guys, and I really hope that I don't have any AI contraventions. We are very strict about AI, generative AI. You guys see your Turnitin similarity reports. You don't see your AI flag report. So we take a look at that, and we are strict on it. The system flags you, and we refer you. So it's not that difficult, guys. Also, please add AI declarations in your work. If you haven't used AI at all, also put that in a declaration. That's just to make it easy for you, right? If you've used Grammarly, there's a sort of I understand that there's a policy that you don't have to declare Grammarly, but here's the problem. If you're sitting with a relatively high AI score, and you don't declare your Grammarly, then, good evening, Ali, then it means I'm going to refer you. When I refer you for AI, I don't publish your mark, guys. Your mark is withheld. It's not lekker. It's a bit of a turmoil waiting for the outcome. And then, of course, the outcome can be one of three, uh, one of four, perhaps. The one is that there's no consequences for the AI contravention. The second is that there's no consequences, but you have to redo and resubmit. The third is that you are capped at 50%. And the fourth, which I've seen many times, believe it or not, is that you receive a full round 0 for the submission. So that can happen. Remember, it takes a bit of time. Sorry, I've got a bit of a dry throat, so I'm drinking my Coke Zero here. It takes a bit of time to get the marks out and turn around on that, so be patient. I do believe we will see it next week. All right, on PAS, your next assignment is due in 2 weeks from now, and I'll spend a bit of time on going through the assignment brief with you guys this evening and just make sure that we are on the same page. Let me just drag this one over. Any questions? Is everyone well? You guys are very quiet. Okay, let's hope this opens up. Memory is refreshing. Assignment 2. Okay. So you did see that assignment 2 is a group assignment, folks. Please, if you've got questions, just raise a hand. Use the chat. Dieter is excused. Thank you. Thanks, Ali. Now, what's going on? I hate it when the system is slow. Oh, sign into your account. Let me just refresh here. Oh, my goodness. How annoying. Sorry, guys. I was in this the whole day, and now that's old Murphy, hey? That's Murph doing his thing. I must tell you one thing that we are seeing more and more, and it can sometimes be frustrating, is the protection of IP and the permissions and all sorts of things that we see now with university IP. All right, guys. Assignment 2, group assignment. Why did we start looking at groups? I'm going to answer you now. Oh, it's taking forever to load. Ali, what I said was you guys can expect your results for assignment 1 early next week, I hope. It takes a bit of time to get the marks finalized, approved, verified, moderated in case of moderation. I was also just expressing that I sincerely hope that I don't have AI contraventions in this year as I've started marking other modules at other qualifications. I've seen a lot of AI investigations that went down, and there's always consequences on that. So please, guys, don't misuse AI. I also said please add an AI declaration at the end of your assignments. It's just good practice. That is a detailed declaration, guys. We had Michelle Coates here. Go back to that session as well. The AI declaration should include exactly how you used AI, the dates, what you asked it, which AI engines you used, what responses you got. The dividing line is using AI to help you shape your thinking is ordering your thoughts. That could be acceptable. Using AI to do anything for you, where AI takes a generative focus and produces work, that's regarded as not your own work. And of course, that's the dangerous side of AI, guys. But you understand that well. As I say, I'm holding thumbs to look at that. I'll complete the marking shortly, and then yeah, next week. Any other questions on that? You're welcome to ask. All right, assignment 2. So here's the big thing, point 6 here. This is a group assignment. Why did we start doing some group work earlier in the semester? Simply because I wanted you guys to get familiar with each other. I wanted you to get into your groups and start getting to know the people in a group. Group assignments is a painful process. It's always painful, like making decisions. Collaborative decision making is always a painful process. They bring that into the module to expose you guys in growing that skill as well, because in the world, in the real world, in the world of work, the corporate world, the career world, we can't always choose with whom we work. So we are sitting in the sometimes painful process of working in teams and so on. And high performance teams especially need to be in a place where they perform well. So the old form, storm, norm, perform. Groups tend to go through those cycles to reach the point of high level performance where people see each other's skills and so on. I wanna also ask you to make a point of determining who has what skills. Sometimes you've got someone in your group that's good with editing documents. Sometimes you've got a person that says, listen, I'm very good with referencing and working with references and organizing references and checking referencing styles and that sort of thing. On that point, most of you will probably lose marks for referencing style. That's the 5%. You'll shake your head and you will hopefully say never again. But it's always a trend. I always see that in the first submission, and then you see, listen, we're serious. We look at commas and spaces and brackets and italics and all of that. All right. Assignment 2, group assignment. And there's the referencing rubric, the very one that we are talking about now, 5 or 10%, guys. That's a lot. Don't play around with that. There are 2 parts to this one. The first is a submission that is done on ARC, like we normally do. And the second one consists of a presentation. Your question to me might be, when will we do the presentations? And the answer is that we will do that. We will do that in class, and we will do it in close proximity to the submission. That's how it's supposed to work. So, I'll speak more about this next week, but what you guys will typically do is you will submit your group assignments. You will also submit a copy of the presentation that you are using, um, just for record purposes. And then we will present live. You'll see there's a panel of judges. Yes, I might involve some other people in those sessions. And the panel of judges, of course, are there to evaluate and also to handle Q&A. The rest of you will also form part of the audience, folks, so please you're not allowed to excuse yourself or to run away. Whilst other groups are presenting, you will sit there. All right, so presentation, there's a formal presentation. We've done some practicing on that as well. And that's the story, the two parts. All right, the group assignment. This is about your group will conceptualize a tech-driven venture that leverages technology to address one of the social problems that they named there: education, inequalities, healthcare, energy, poverty, food insecurity, financial exclusion, and so on. And your venture should then demonstrate these things: entrepreneurial thinking, creativity, feasibility, and so on. That's very straightforward, folks. The submission on ARC is part 1. The presentation component sits in part 2. All right, there's some additional stuff they're giving you here. Remember, always when we talk about an essay format, this is not the essay that you wrote in school about your December romance. It's not an essay. Use headings, use structure, use subheadings. Think more of a report, guys, than an essay. An essay is one block of text where you just carry on. So yes, I want structure. I want definite uh, logical flow and layout that is sensible, dealing with the outcomes under headings and subheadings. Also, of course, I want to see those in your TOC. Right, you are required to read widely. Yes, guys, the textbook and the module material is just a start. Then a minimum of 8 credible sources. And please, guys, treat that as a minimum, excluding your prescribed material. Nothing stops you from putting more references in there. You will score goodwill from my side when you put more references in, more than 8. All right. Examples and so on. All right. So that's the whole story. There's a cover page. There's a detailed TOC. There's a description, technology, innovation plan. All those are outcomes, guys. These are all distinct outcomes. There's a lot of them. They are all required to be addressed distinctly and in their own. Don't leave out some of those components. Right. And then there's a visual representation. Remember, we did an infographic at some time. I said I want an image, a prototype, infographic, storyboard, some sort of a visual thing to show and effectively communicate the core concept and impact of your venture. And they say this visual will be used later in your presentation. All right, the group presentation, so it's a 60-40 count, I think. 10-minute presentation, guys, and then the panel of judges. You may present your software of your choice. I know you guys know how to use these respective software suites, so that's good. And again, here is the outcomes or the things that we want you to address specifically. Remember, when you are doing presentations, guys, when you're compiling presentations, where there's a soft copy submission, the aim of the presentation is not to completely reproduce what you had there. You're going to submit something which I'm going to look at as well. So don't try and cram everything into the presentation. Don't give me cluttered slides where you copy text from your submission and put paragraphs into a slide. We don't want that. Please, on that note, slides, very important, guys. The slides are there to lightly guide your reader. The slides are not there to convey all this massive information. You, as a speaker, live presenting, you convey the info. You use the presentation slides to earth and ground your audience member as to what you are busy now. You don't clutter a slide with small font, lots and lots and lots of info, expecting your audience member to read through all of that. That's not the purpose of slides. Avoid slides that are bizarre in terms of effects or funny, unusual color schemes. Make it interesting, but keep it professional, folks. It's not there to look spectacular. It's not there to look outrageous. Use graphics wisely. It's very interesting when you put a nice thought-provoking graphic in a slide and then there's your bullets. And I've seen you guys, you can do that sort of thing. And again, maybe there's someone in your group that says, that's my thing. I love to work with this. I want to put those together. I will work with the graphics and so on. When there's a little graphic on a slide that stimulates your thinking, or it's interesting, or what's the word, intriguing, it's very nice. And then there's your keywords and so on. You guys know what I'm talking about. So no cluttered slides, no too much information. The slides are there to guide you, but you convey the information, which then essentially means that in this preparation, you as the speaker needs to be well prepared, guys. You need to be well prepared. If we were in a face-to-face situation, you would stand there facing the audience, and you would not read your presentation from index card. Well, index cards, yes, something we use, but you wouldn't read everything here. You would actually engage and be present inside your audience, making reference to these slides as you speak and go along. All right, so there's all of that. Our rubrics are here, pretty straightforward. Again, guys, as we always say, look at what we say in the rubric, because the rubric gives language to, listen, the expectation associated with this submission, with this outcome. So the language you see here is very nice guidance. It's tips, it's directive in terms of what the expectation is. All right, so it is a 60-40 split. We're sitting with a 60 here for the soft copy. And then there's a 40 for the presentation component. There's one that you will see here as well, and I quickly want to touch on that, the peer evaluation. You will see right at the outset, they speak about the peer evaluation form that you need to complete at the end of the each student should complete the peer eval form at the end of the document. I don't see that in this one. I don't know if you guys have seen peer evaluations elsewhere, but I'll quickly tell you what my take on peer evaluation is. So here's the thing. All group members are required to present, guys. That's not negotiable. So there's 3 or 4 in this group. Everyone needs to present. You cannot say, listen, I'm not good at presenting, so I'm not going to do that. Everyone, it does appear in A2. Thanks, Al. You have to present. Then in terms of the peer evaluation, I want to tell you what it should not be, and that would make it easier. Look, we are team members. We might have different contributions. You might have someone that's not necessarily fantastic with finding sources, but they do a massively fantastic job in editing your final document, or whatever the case may be. But members are pulling their weight, and you are drawing on people's skills as you require this for your submission. If you have the situation where a member of a group does not pull his or her weight, the peer evaluation comes into play, and it can be used as a standard of 5 marks working down. What I would like to see and what I would like to put down at the outset as a place to start would be to say, let's work on a 5%, on a 5 mark peer evaluation as the standard, as the normative, as the expectation. What I don't want to see is, and I've seen that in the past, is you don't get along with this person, or there's some personal grudge, or you've got beef with someone, and now you use the peer evaluation to penalize a person. That's not what this is about. So don't be petty about it, if I can use that word. Don't be petty about the peer evaluation. In fact, I want to always tell you guys, the standard situation I want to see is that everyone gives full marks to their peers, the 5. By all means, there is merit to penalize group members, but then of course you would sort of expect to see the same thing. There's 3 or 4 people in your group, and group member number 2 didn't pull his weight, didn't pull her weight. One would expect that the remainder of the group members would say the same thing, right? Because that is evident then that this member did not contribute well. So that's the story. But there's always going to be conflicts and this or that. Don't be petty about this. Don't use this to grind axes. I think that's pretty clear. That's enough said. All right. So I don't see it here, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Folks, it's pretty straightforward. Yes, you will submit your presentation. You will submit your soft copy as well. And then we will dial into our normal classroom and we will do live presentations where group members will take turns. Yes, you can really go where you want to with this. Make it interesting. Give us something to learn from and enjoy. That's it on the assignment brief. With that in mind, I want to show you a video now, and I hope it works. I'm going to share. I think sound is on. I just want to make sure. On something very interesting, you guys are looking at a tech. You guys are looking at a tech-driven venture, and I want to share these with you. Right, I do think sound is on, folks. Let's just hope this works. It's a video about 10-12 minutes. Let's start. Can I ask you? Can I ask you? I will run it full screen. Just show me with a thumbs up. Is the sound streaming, guys? Can you hear the sound? All right, sound is working. I'm just going to bring the settings down a bit because I don't need to run it on 720. We can run it low res. And what I sometimes do, yes, all of us will do it in our timetable sessions. And it will be in the normal sessions, Ali. We won't do anything outside that. We are not many groups here, so we will definitely do it in a group. If you look at the 10-minute time that we have per group, it's going to work out fine for all of us in one session. Yes. All right, let's look at this. China turns to live streaming to boost consumer spending. Guys, I don't know if you've heard of live shopping, but let's take a look at this, and we'll talk after.
In the wild world of live streaming in China, billions of dollars are made in real time. From beauty products to farm fresh cherries everything's up for grabs. Some live streamers hype up products with flashy sales tactics, while others flip the script, showing each item for just 3 seconds and still pulling in millions. It's massive, and no other country even comes close to China when it comes to live streaming.
Live streaming is a huge thing here in China. It's a multi-billion dollars business. Every year, thousands and thousands of live streamers showcase different kind of products for different kind of industries on different platforms. There are tons of platforms where people actually showcase their products.
Stop taking meeting notes and let ClickUp AI Note Taker do it for you. It allows you to focus on your meetings, not your notes.
China's live streaming e-commerce industry has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar business. With live video broadcasts, real-time sales, influencer marketing, and interactive shopping, it has a market value of $760 billion in 2024. And forecasts indicate that the market will surpass $1 trillion by 2026.
Here in this place, we can see that they have different kind of cubicles or booths in this shooting area where they're showcasing all type of products, mostly related to the production of fruits, condiments, and vegetables in this area, this part of China.
In China, 5 main platforms dominate live streaming. Taobao Live is one of the biggest ones, run by Alibaba. It's all about shopping and massive sales events like Singles Day. Douyin, China's TikTok, mixes fun and shopping, while Kuaishou loans more down-to-earth with a loyal fan base. Then there's JD Live from JD.com and Pinduoduo. Both focus on e-commerce. Other key players include Bilibili and WeChat channels, the latest to join, turning China all-in-one app into a live stream hub too.
它是由巨子生物研发，拥有专利的生物性成分。发明人是由新中国培养的第一位生物化工博士。
The live stream industry in China is wild. Some live streamers are like rock stars, and some top influencers have turned online selling into a billion-dollar show. Li Jiaqi, the king of live streaming, went from selling lipstick to making more in a day than some countries. On Singles Day 2023, he pulled in a staggering $1.4 billion in one day. His catchphrase, "Oh my god, buy it," is a pop culture staple in China. But in September 2023, things went south. While selling a 79 yuan, around $11 eyebrow pencil, some viewers complained it was too expensive. Li fired back saying, "Is 79 yuan really expensive? Have you worked hard enough?" The comment sparked outrage, with people calling him out for being tone deaf, especially given the economic slowdown and high youth unemployment.
So I want to enter and show you a little bit how it looks like. This is basically a very simple space. You might have some advertising of the brand because these are kind of cooperation of for different brands where they have the space. They invite live streamers or vloggers to come here and show their product. Basically just one table with several products like this one. This is lychee, a very, very popular product from this part of Guangdong province. And of course, they're gonna have all the equipment like the lights, the light ring in front. They have the devices to place their phones.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
During the pandemic, especially between 2020 and 2021, live streaming in China just exploded. With lockdowns shutting down physical stores, everyone from small brands to big names rushed online. Even luxury brands like Gucci and BMW jumped on live streams. Even Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba, went live at one point. Farmers and local governments got in on too, and while all this was happening, Douyin was blowing up. By 2021, its sales grew a crazy 800% year-on-year, and it actually overtook Taobao Live in terms of engagement.
Most of these live streamings, of course, they will use simply a smartphone rather than a professional camera. Phone nowadays, they have all the capabilities to record in 4K, send the videos in real time to the different platforms. They just place it there and just talk to the viewers through different platforms about their products.
The live streamer Xinba might not be as flashy as Li Jiaqi, but his sales are just as wild. He regularly pulls about $14 million per stream, selling everything from durians to cherries. What really sets him apart is how he's changing the game for farmers, helping them selling straight to millions of viewers, turning fresh produce into live stream gold.
Most of the live streamings, I will say, they're made in Chinese or for the local market here in China, but I'm pretty sure there's more than one brand that is actually making content in other languages to start promoting and exporting these products to other parts of the world.
Since 2022, things have really matured in the live streaming scene. By 2023, there were over 6 million live stream sellers, so the competition got pretty fierce. On top of that, the big tax scandals hit. The popular live streamer Villa got slapped with a huge $210 million fine for tax evasion, which led to way stricter regulation across the board. But with all that, new trends started popping up. Now we've got virtual streamers like AI avatars running 24/7 sales. Plus, there is a whole wave of cross-border live streamers targeting overseas Chinese audiences.
Mind-blowing, and is something that we are starting to see more and more often in different parts of China for different products and different brands.
Another notorious live streamer called Villa was once the queen of live streaming, even outshining Li Jiaqi at her peak. But in 2022, things came crashing down. She was banned for streaming. It was a huge scandal that rocked the whole industry and made other streamers seriously rethink how they handle their money.
So technology is something they use in these kind of live streaming rooms, and I got some of the stuff that we find here got my attention. First, we see here, this is a sign, of course in Chinese, that says after 5 minutes the live streaming will finish, or the live streaming session will finish, and this is something that the person on the other end might have to let the content creator know that the session will finish in 5 minutes so they can be prepared. There's also this little device that is connected to the phone that works as a remote control to start shooting or start recording or start the live streaming session. And the other thing is have a regular remote control to control the lights. These are special lights that can be adjusted to make the brighter or lower intensity. You can also control the temperature of the lights, like you want a colder or warmer. So basically you have all the items that you need for a live streaming here.
A lot of what made live streaming in China so massive is down to a few key innovations. First off, mobile payments like Alipay and WeChat Pay made buying super easy with just one click. Then there's the logistics network. Same-day delivery made it so people could impulse buy and get stuff right away. Another big factor was gamification. Things like limited time discounts and interactive polls kept people hooked. And of course, the algorithms. Douyin's AI is crazy good at pushing live streams to exactly the right audience, which made it way easier to find and follow your favorite sellers. In the live streaming world in China, there is something for everyone. Let's talk about Dong Yuhui. His rise is kinda wild. Unlike the loud Buy Now crowd, he's a former English teacher who sells farm products while dropping quotes from Shakespeare and chatting about philosophy. Super chill and smart, but somehow it totally worked. By 2023, this soft-spoken guy was pulling in around $2.8 million per day. What's truly astonishing is how these top streamers earn. Their income comes from their explosive streams. huge sales commission, often from 10 to 50% per item, virtual gifts from fans, and lucrative brand deals. The very best can make millions in a single night, but they pay for it with brutal hours, sometimes streaming for more than 12 hours straight without breaks. Another big name is Crazy Little Young Brothers. These guys are legends in China livestream scene. They started out with hilarious family comedy skits on Douyin and totally blew up. Now, they've got over 100 million followers and regularly sells over 14 million US dollars worth of stuff in a single stream. Their monthly sales easily in the hundreds of millions. Live streaming gotten so big in China that even A-list celebrities are jumping in. TV stars now host sales events like pros, mixing their fame with full-on sales hustle. And when they go live, fans flooding by the millions prove that in China, shopping and entertainment are basically one and the same now. Another unusual live streamer, Chen Xiangxiang, is a viral star on Chinese internet. Known for her super minimalistic live streaming style, instead of long pitches, she shows each product for just 3 seconds. An assistant hands her the item, she flashes it into the camera, says a price, and moves right on to the next one. It's totally different from the usual live stream hype, but somehow it works really well. In just 1 week, she reportedly pulled around 13.7 million US dollars, mostly selling super affordable items under $2 US. China's livestream e-commerce has grown from a niche experiment to a full-on retail revolution. It started as a fun way to shop, but now it's replacing TV and reshaping how people buy. The success? It's all about the tech. Easy mobile payments, fast delivery, and smart AI recommendations. But the real key is the hosts. They are super charismatic, turning shopping into entertainment. Plus, China's culture loves real-time interaction, which makes live streaming way more engaging than traditional retail.
Okay. So people, I want to show you one other short one as well. But how interesting is that, hey? I've pinned down some things here that caught my ear. Also, obviously, you guys also picked up on interesting stuff. One thing that I heard was that they say multi-billion, and they are looking at a 1 trillion US dollar revenue in 2026. Now, 1 trillion, guys. 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. 1,000 billion. That's a 1 with 12 zeros behind it. A 1 with 12 following zeros. That's a big total, hey? That's the sort of revenue, the annual revenue predicted here in China from live selling in 2026. Yeah, they said some of these influencers or live sellers make more than certain countries. Some countries do in a day. What also caught my eye was it's a small cubicle, hey, about the size of a small office. There's minimum equipment there. There's not fancy equipment, and yet they are able to generate these massive earnings with those relatively small and little resources. Did you hear about that person or the brothers that do 14 million, 14 million US dollar turnover per live cell stream? That's interesting. Then they also said that there's AI avatars coming into that space instead of people. And then they spoke about 4 distinct things that guarantees the success of this whole story. The first was The payment gateways are very clever. You can click and pay. So there's a lot of technology sitting behind the ease of mobile payment gateways technology. Then the logistics. The impulse buyer wants their produce quick. They want that product quick. So same day delivery, they said, is part of the logistical backbone of this. Then an interesting thing to hook people, gamification. Guys, look at how many people are busy on their phones with some sort of game. Now, maybe some of you are there playing stuff on your phone or your tablet. So gamification is a huge way of drawing people in. And then they say algorithms. So it's all about the intelligent algorithms that sit behind that. Those 4 factors are listed as making this a success. Then they said shopping and entertainment essentially becomes one thing. The entertainment value of shopping is what this looked at. The 3-second lady, I'll show you a quick video about her. She's the one that they said the products are all below $2, but she also turns about $14 million per week. Then someone observed that, or the commentator observed that live shopping is replacing television in terms of view times. And it's all about the tech, guys. The whole tech is what makes this work, right? Charismatic hosts is something that they also mentioned as contributing to the success. And then the culture in China, where they are very fond of live interaction. Isn't that interesting? Now I want to show you some of the things here of how this 3-second lady does her thing. Let's take a look. I just want to maybe bring the quality down again. All right, the quality is okay. I'll leave it at 360. Let's see what this lady does.
8块钱2斤，再加2斤，再加2斤，8块钱6斤小车，来喽，39，10块，10块，19块钱包，55片来上车，19，8块，嘎嘎好的质量，9块2个来上车，9块，这工作不错，39。9块钱发10双，9块，哪里不便宜哪里便宜，14块钱上车，刷点关注，19，29，6块，看一下我清楚一半，13来直接上车，9块，20。
This woman just sold 18 items over the span of a minute, each averaging 3 seconds per item, and none of them are too expensive, under $2-3 each. Without people even realizing what she's selling, that item is gone. She is Zheng Xiangxiang, an online shopping influencer. Today we're going to talk about the bizarre and sometimes even crazy reactions and how the Chinese shopping experience is like. Now remember when people actually bought things from the QVC, and in Canada I think it's called the Shopping Channel. Well, this is basically China today, doing whatever they were doing on TV shopping with infomercials, turning that into online. So think of it like if Costco's sample stations were online. And the basic idea is quite simple. You have an influencer who can answer questions from commenters. They can ask them about the sizes, the color, texture, the material, the quality, etc. And all of these things can be answered live. So it's like you're doing a live sale for hundreds of thousands of people online. And a lot of times they work directly with the manufacturer of the product, so they're getting the best price and it's hard to beat anywhere else. And that makes the consumer side much more attractive and you want to buy it. However, Zheng Xiangxiang is doing something very different. From August to September this year, Zheng Xiangxiang live streamed a total of 64 times, and she averaged of online viewers concurrently at 5,000, totaling a cumulative view of 81 million. But in October, which is last month, she sold $10 million in conversion worth of stuff on Douyin, which is China's TikTok, with her overall view jumping to 120 million for the month. Her sales methods are actually quite unique even for China's online shopping experience. She doesn't really describe the product, she gives each 3 seconds one quick look, and you have to decide whether you want it or not on the spot, otherwise it's sold within the next 5 seconds. Now, I have to be realistic, this is pretty mesmerizing to look at. You're seeing constantly these orange boxes left and right, shifting to in front of her. She takes a look at it, grabs it, tells you the price, and then moves on to the next. She has a very calming voice. So it no wonders that she gained somewhat of a success in this field, because that's a unique aspect. But these boxes, they imitate Hermes, and they're trying to package cheap goods in a luxury packaging. And that's her key here. So she's selling stuff really cheap. And these are not good quality products. In fact, her return rate is quite high. So people feel like she is simply selling really low-end products to try to make marginal profits at a much higher return than what you would expect from another seller. Her products are cheap and they're not brand named, but that's not her point of selling. She's selling urgency. She's selling this crowd psychological behavior, which is that if everybody wants to buy it at the same time, whether you want it or not, or you need it or not, or if it's even good, you want to have it because other people want to have it. So are they really buying a shock factor, or are they really buying her stuff? And is she the only one doing this live streaming stuff? No, China has a full-blown e-commerce shopping experience around influencers and live streaming. Now, this is very interesting about Zheng Xiangxiang. She's not an established person or a celebrity. She doesn't have an influencer base. She gained her success quite fast. But precisely because of this, she's a newcomer in the sense of nobody knew her before this year, that she quickly gained success through her unique formula. So what she's excelling at is selling things really fast and really cheap. Now, this method has largely been done by companies like Temu and Pinduoduo, who has essentially owns Temu and is the Chinese version, as well as companies like Shein, who sell really cheap stuff at a discounted rate, unbelievable to our consumer ideas of what, you know, a shirt would sell for, or what pair of pants would sell for. But they do it. In fact, I went on Temu today just to take a look at what's going on. You can buy 5 things at a discounted 50%, and they tag on an additional $250 coupon depending on how much you spend. So it's like you're spending the same money to buy one item at a different store, but on Temu you can buy 5, 6, 7, 8 items for that same amount of money. So we understand today a lot of young kids, they want to be online influencers, but in China, being an influencer is the first step. Being an influencer that can sell stuff is the final step. This is James.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the video there. I think we got the message from this one. Interesting, eh? So yeah, it's I don't know if you guys are Temu fans. I bought from Temu a couple of times and I wasn't too impressed, even to the fact where you say, listen, it's rubbish, but wow, it's so exciting, hey? And there's something that there's a key phrase that caught my ear now. This person says, this lady, this 3-second lady, she is selling on crowd psychological behavior. Crowd psychological behavior. The goods are rubbish, but she's selling. They're turning money. Isn't that interesting? Now, yeah, I thought I'd share that with you guys and then maybe get your thinking stimulated in terms of your projects. I don't know if you watched the media today. So this is the fuel price, dreaded, guys. This is depressing. They're sitting at if the current 3 rand per liter emergency levy is now discontinued or it expires, as we see here, that could look at a May increase, and I think that's on the 6th of May. It's normally the first Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it's around the 6th of May. They're looking at 6-7 rand for petrol. But look at this, guys, 14 rand for diesel. Now, obviously, you know, some of our students here on campus are already saying, listen, they're not attending classes. They're starting to skip classes because of the fuel price. Student budgets. What happens with this 14 rand on diesel in May? Guys, it's lelik. I mean, not only will it definitely give our economy a big blow. But I think the consequences is massive, eh? So yeah, that's not lucky to hear. The key drivers of the hike: global oil volatility, the expiry of the relief, currency weakness. There's always things we don't believe it anymore. This is what I want to also just show you folks now. If they say the CPI inflation can go to 4.2, remember the Reserve Bank has only one goal, and that's to keep inflation, or their big goal is to keep inflation between or under 3%, under 4% preferably. They were always between 3 and 6. They've moved that down. They've got only one instrument to do that. Can you guys tell me what it is? What's the instrument they use, Cameron, to manage inflation rates?
I'm sorry, sir. I'm not 100% certain.
I'll tell you the answer. Prime lending rate. That's the only thing that they can use. Now listen to this, guys. This is such a balls up. When you have inflation, and remember, inflation is literally your money getting the worth or the value of your currency is getting less year on year. So if I've got a 10 rand in my drawer now, I can buy something with that 10 rand. I can go into the grocery shop with that 10 bucks and buy stuff. If I go with that same 10 bucks, still the same, currency looks the same. I go to the shop, I cannot buy the amount or the quantity I bought last year because the buying power of my currency has decreased. Last year I could buy 5 apples. A year later I can only buy 4 apples for 10 rand. That's essentially what inflation means. Now the problem and the dilemma with this, guys, which is massively concerning from an economic viewpoint, is there are two types of inflation. The one is market pull. I'm going to make it bigger now. And the other one is cost push. Now it's very, very, very important to understand the difference between these two. Market pull inflation means people are spending too much. There's too much money going around. People are spending too much. So using interest rate hikes, the prime lending rate hike, to bring that down is a good strategy. Nothing wrong with that. It works well. What we're seeing here, however, is not a market pull inflation. It's not a spending. It's not an expenditure inflation. We're sitting with a cost push inflation, guys. It's a completely different thing. Inflation is rising not because people are spending too much in lavish lifestyles. Inflation is rising because of underlying costs, in this case, fuel. What you do now, what the Reserve Bank do now with the only crude, yes, listen to me, crude instrument of inflation or of lending, prime lending rate hikes, is they are double penalizing a public that's already suffering from the higher costs. Can you see what I'm saying? It is the worst way from an economist point of view to address cost push inflation. You are penalizing people who are already battered. All right. Fuel price. What's an elastic demand? Does anyone know? What does an elastic demand mean? Anyone? Can I ask someone? Ellie, do you know what an elastic demand means in economic terms? Ellie, you there? You can get substitute products for it. Yeah, not really. Elasticity, like an elastic band, it's a good effort, Ali. Basically means that the economic demand for that certain good or product is very much linked to price. So if I would say going out to watch movies, going to eat out, that sort of thing, that is an elastic demand. Why? Because if we see prices rising for those goods and services, people will demand less. A non-elastic demand, let's say that, non-elastic demand is something like insulin. If you are a diabetic and you use insulin, I think it's the right spelling, I hope so. That's a non-elastic demand. You need the insulin and you're going to buy it regardless of the price. Do you understand the difference? Now, fuel there's an elastic demand on fuel. I don't know when you guys filled up. I filled up March before the price hike, and I'm still on my fuel tank with my March fuel. So all of us guys, we are thinking twice before you jump in a car and drive around, and we're dreading this next increase. And some of you will also tell me you are also still on your March fuel tank because of this elastic demand for fuel. We are going to buy less fuel, right? That's what it means. Now, with all of that, I think there's going to open up huge opportunities in terms of e-commerce, guys. There's going to lot of e-commerce opportunities opening up in our country. Just quickly, something here about live shopping. They say in China, this influencer live shopping is looking at about 30% of all e-commerce. TikTok is the main thing. You see the video, you enter the live stream, you tap a product link, you pay, you track shipping, and you got it. All without ever closing the video player. You do all of that in that one app, which is amazing. It's frictionless. They talk about the main role players here that play in this. And then they also talk about why this is so addictive. And there's some of the things that we spoke about now. Urgency and scarcity, you don't want to miss out, right? Look, guys, if they put a special on the shelves, we also tend to go for that. These are marketing tricks. You can buy tomato sauce at a special price, only 2 per customer. And now you jump and buy this tomato sauce. Maybe you don't even like tomato sauce. Or you've got a full bottle in the fridge, but the special is there. And you buy it, and you can maybe buy it. I think a lot of so-called specials are not really specials, but it's something, again, in our psychology that sort of catches up on that name. Then they say it's moving from hype to value, so people are looking for value. Hyper local, niche. There are some regulatory stuff put into place. And here's just a summary of why this works so well. It starts getting a daily habit, guys. Let's just think about our own digital consumption. All of us, if we are honest, we will admit to one another that we are digitally consuming way too much, right? True. So it becomes habit. There's an entertainment thing. And then the big thing here is there's a one-tap facility, so it doesn't redirect you. In the e-commerce market, there's a couple of things. If you guys are considering doing something or bringing that into your projects, there's a couple of risks I want to just show you that all of us have when it comes to e-commerce business. The first is the perceived financial risk or economic risk, where we say we can suffer monetary loss, right? We can pay money and not see it again. There's the perceived performance risk, where we say, all right, we are not sure that the goods that lands here will work properly or will work as advertised. Or you buy something on Temu and it's a blom pot, it's a flower pot, and when you get it, it's this big because there were no scale in the picture, and you bought this and you think, oh, that's real funny. But I don't mind because it cost me $10. You hear what I'm saying? But what about putting down a lot of money for some high value good or product, and there's a performance risk? Then there's the time loss risk. Now, this has got to do with you spending time with the convenience of online, but you're spending time. There's slow websites. There's payment problems. There's you buying something only to find out that it's out of stock. You know, that sort of hassles that you sometimes get. Then, of course, the privacy risk is always there, guys. There's the risk that your personal data, your financial banking data could be used inappropriately. It's very real. It's a real thing. We know that. And then there's the perceived source risks, which means you might suffer loss because the business from which you buy is not necessarily reputable or trustworthy. Yes, and we all probably have a story or two about that sort of thing as well. Guys, I see our time is over again. That's going to be it for this evening. Just some interesting things with the unfortunate and depressing background with the fuel price. And I thought I'd share with you guys the opportunities that might arise from the elastic demand in fuel, traveling, hopping in a car, in terms of online and e-commerce ventures, and the tech-driven synergies and alignment that you can typically get from those sort of things. I'll see you guys next week. Take care, and it's still my privilege to work with all of you. Keep an eye out next week for results, and then we chat soon, folks. Take care.